everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining. I'd just like to start right now by acknowledging that we're meeting today on the traditional lands of the Tonga Nation, where we're honored to live, work, and learn on their traditional territory. We've got 3 presentations today, so I'll just remind everyone that you have 10 minutes, and someone will timekeep and let you know when you're approaching that 10 minutes. And first up today we have Lisa. If you want to just stay in place and stand, that would be perfect.
Alright, thank you everyone for giving me the privilege to speak today. I have many things that I can speak on, but I'm hoping to keep it to the most pressing issues. I would like to speak to the implementation of a vaccine mandate for our school district. I know that the BC government has granted the school district to impose their own mandate for each district for their teachers. I know many teachers and teacher assistants who work in most of the schools here in Powell River. Most of them do not agree with this mandatory vaccine mandate, and they all know that they need all the staff that they have, plus 7 more schools than they have working right now. BC teachers use the curriculum that the BC government has developed. In this social studies grade 5, 6, 7 curriculum, the curriculum teaches our children about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and how to stand up for our rights and make responses to discrimination in Canada. The curriculum also discusses the past discriminatory government policies and actions and challenges them to take a stand for their rights and freedoms. Also, it challenges them to make ethical judgments about events, decisions, actions that consider the conditions of a particular time and place and assess the appropriate ways to respond. We just celebrated our first National Day of Reconciliation and Truth for the discrimination of our Aboriginals. Our nation celebrates our rights and freedoms. We also celebrated Remembrance Day on November 11th. So many soldiers fought many battles for our freedom. Since our Constitution was founded in 1867, we have had fundamental freedoms: freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. Every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, mental, or physical disability. Also, every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and benefit of the law without discrimination. If in the BC curriculum we're teaching our children about human rights and how to stand up for our freedoms, why should we be mandating a vaccine mandate for our teachers and staff that may go against fundamental freedoms? I would also like to address the masking of our children in our schools. Let me share a few stories and examples with you. Constantly daily headaches, these are things that have happened here in Powell River. Teacher pressures kids and makes them feel guilty if they don't wear a mask because his wife is pregnant and he's trying to stay safe. A 10-year-old boy comes home from school and shares with his mom he can't wear his glasses when he has to wear a mask. She asks why. He says, well, his glasses fog up and he can't see. And to top it off, he can't breathe. And now he's crying and his glasses are so fogged up and upset and he can't excuse himself to go to the bathroom because he can't see and he's feeling claustrophobic. A sub-teacher demands everyone, even mask-exempt students, to wear a mask, and then proceeds to a boy and asks him, what? You don't think hockey players can get COVID? After that, my daughter, who has a mask mandate, never took her mask off. So for mask exemptions, I went to the schools for my kids and asked about mask exemption, and they were granted, which is excellent. And at the beginning of the next term, the principal said that we can just email the teachers again. So, smallest one, a little bit of science. We breathe in oxygen. We need oxygenated blood to go to our organs to work properly. We breathe out carbon dioxide. When we wear a mask, we breathe carbon dioxide into the mask. But we don't get fresh oxygen into our lungs, and we breathe carbon dioxide. It causes high to toxic carbon dioxide levels based on how long the mask is on. So if you're outside, normal carbon dioxide levels are 250 to 300. Indoor spaces like this would be 350 to 1,000. 1,000 to 2,000, there's levels: headache, sleepiness, stale, stagnant air, poor concentration, loss of attention, increased heart rate. And then over 5,000 indicates unusual air conditions where toxicity could be present. So within 10 seconds of wearing a mask, depending on which kind of mask you're using, levels of carbon dioxide are over 1,000 parts per million. Within 15 to 30 seconds, levels are over 5,000 parts per million. So why are we masking our children? How are these carbon dioxide levels safe? We're starving our children's brains of oxygen. Are we to adhere to the laws of our government that hurt the development of our children's brains? Which overrides which? I say it's bad parenting if we don't care about our oxygen levels in our children's brains. Last thing I would like to address is the vaccine clinics in our schools. In October, a notice of liability was served, and our school district agreed that there would not be clinics in our schools. These vaccines, COVID vaccines, are not FDA approved yet, and they're still in trials until 2023. If you watch mainstream news, you will see one side of the story, but there is another side of the story, but you will really need to search to find out that information. The risk of COVID-19 under 18 years of age is very low. I have some facts that I can read here, but children under 18 who have died from COVID-19 is 0.00075%. And according to the CDC, the infection fatality rate for children under 18 is 0.002. Therefore, survival rate is 99.998%. There's 5 reasons for this. Young children have been primed by other viruses, and their immune systems have been trained to recognize the commonality with the SARS-CoV-2. Children have a greater number of natural killer cells patrolling in their body, and children have a better trained immune system in general. So, at the time of these clinics, I don't believe informed consent is offered to those who are determining whether or not they will be vaccinated with the COVID vaccine. A list of the adverse effects that we know, that we were to know before the FDA approved the emergency approval. Some of the effects are convulsions, seizures, stroke, anaphylaxis, myocarditis, pericarditis, autoimmune disease, death, pregnancy and birth outcomes, arthritis, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. Do you know that the vaccine that they're preparing for 5 to 11-year-olds has an added medication in the vaccine to reduce the effects of immediate heart attacks? Have you seen the propaganda out there on buses and poster boards stating that kids have strokes too? Know the symptoms? Do you know that at a COVID vaccine clinic there was a sign that reminded parents to donate their children's organs? Have you seen the newest Sesame Street programming that encourages kids to be the hero by getting a COVID-19 vaccine? Do you know that COVID SARS has not even been isolated? There's a documentary by Mrs. Christine Massey that they have not isolated the virus. I've got some examples from our community. In a class, a teacher tells the kids that he's double vaxxed and he wants to keep his wife safe because she's immune compromised, even though they're too young right now. But if they care about him and his wife and their families, they should get vaxxed too, because it's the right thing to do. A 10-year-old has a question and answer session in class one day. Someone asked about how this COVID vaccine could affect fertility in the future. And the teacher answered that it doesn't affect fertility, and you should just get vaccinated, and you should encourage your parents to let you get vaccinated. Another one, a teacher asked the class to all stand up. Then he tells everyone in the class who's vaccinated, please sit down. 2 brave souls stood there standing while he began to reprimand them and tell them that they are the reason we are all still dealing with this COVID vaccine, this world of COVID. If they got vaccinated, destruction of our economy, our livelihoods, and our communities. I see the opinions of the uninformed, the misinformed, and those with conflicted interests dictating personal lifestyles and healthcare choices for the rest of us. I see evidence-based practices being discarded, such as the VAERS reporting system, and the scientific facts considered irrelevant. I see the aggressive censoring of the dialogue and debate if the information doesn't conform to the government's narrative. I see another agenda at play, an agenda to create a new normal when human rights and freedoms are discarded and replaced by mandates and dictates of autocratic and unelected leaders. When pharmaceutical and technology corporations, free of legal liability, are at liberty to impose vaccines, contact tracing, and passports upon citizens with or without consent. When I resist poorly tested vaccine products, or for myself choose to wait until trials are complete in 2023, forced masking, the loss of privacy, and the forced use of vaccine passports to prove my compliance, I'm not doing it for my well-being. I resist these violations of our rights and freedoms, of science and democracy for my children and one day my grandchildren's children. I've lived my life with rights and freedoms, and I recognize these freedoms are being unnecessarily constrained. I know that strong and healthy individuals are at the basis of a strong and healthy society. If the measures being imposed don't take into consideration the health of our community, the health of our economy, the health of our relationships, if the actions violate our rights and freedoms and our bodily sovereignty, if the actions are not evidence-based, they are not the right actions. I believe it's time to stand up and defend our freedoms, our families, and our country. I will not stand and allow this manipulation of our hearts and minds to destroy everything we hold precious. Remembrance Day just passed, and it's a day we stop and celebrate those soldiers who fought for our freedom. In our Constitution, based on my freedom of religion, I truly believe that if I am here on this earth, God placed me here for a purpose, and I will stand for such a time as this. I challenge you to take a step back and look at the past 20 months, and then search for evidence-based truth, and take a stand for what our country was founded upon. Canada was a free country. Let's stand now to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for that well-thought presentation. I know it takes a lot of courage sometimes to stand up in front of a group and talk about your beliefs, so I do appreciate your time. Thank you. And you're almost right on 10 minutes, so good job. And I'm not sure, Michelle Riddle?
Yep.
Okay, hello.
Hi.
Welcome. You're up, and we have 10 minutes, and I'll try to catch your eye and give you 1 minute when we get there, okay?
Perfect, that's great. So first I'd like to give out, these are notices of liability, but they're designed more as information packages. So,
We already received those, you know.
no, not these ones, these are something totally, these are from actually the Canada Health Alliance, which I work for. This is a group of thousands and thousands of doctors and health professionals all across Canada, and we liaise with international health professionals as well. So there are hundreds of thousands of these doctors, especially very, very qualified doctors, who are part of this group.
Sorry, 1 second. Do we allow recording of the audience?
Sorry?
Oh, do we allow recording?
Do we allow recording? And we're going to post it.
Do we allow recording of the
From
audience?
the audience. We don't have a policy against it.
He's recording.
I'm saying, I don't know, but we're recording.
We're recording it.
Do we post our recording?
The board meeting is being recorded, and the link will be posted to our YouTube on our business page by the end of the week.
So if that's your
I
preference,
was just
that's
looking
fine.
for clarity, that's all.
Yeah.
I don't know if we had a policy.
Is that a yes or no?
Continue.
Okay.
Hang on, sorry.
Yeah, so I'm wanting to share the evidence that we are dealing with, and a lot of this evidence has been actively suppressed. It has been actively blocked. Many doctors are being threatened with their careers, with their licenses. Many health professionals are being threatened with their careers, with their licenses. And the reason that we stand up is because we have information that's incredibly important for every human being to know. This is information that is not being shared by governments, and we are not doing it for kicks. We're putting ourselves and our professions at risk by doing this. So the information that I want to share is, again, the three-pronged set that Lisa was just talking about. I'm going to start with the mask mandates first, because they're one of the simplest. So if you could read right here on the box, right there, starting there, just 2 sentences.
This is not a NIOSH
Yeah.
approved product. This product is not designed for use as protection against biohazards, bacteria, viruses.
Okay, that's all we need. Okay? Masks are not designed to protect against spreading of viruses, right? Masks have been studied for a long time. I teach precautions for healthcare professionals, universal precautions, and we talk about masking. And to use a mask correctly, it's a one-shot deal. It's on, you use it for the process, and then it's into the garbage. You don't touch the front of it, you don't hold it on your face for any length of time. When masks, especially the cotton masks, are on a face for any length of time, they collect bacteria, they collect viruses, there's a moist area, and as soon as those masks are moved, that all comes out into the air. For young kids, again, the risks are negligible for catching or spreading COVID-19, and with them, the hazards of wearing the masks are much higher. This is a report, and it's in your package, and this was put out by the British Medical Journal. And I'm just going to go through a couple of the facts that they have here. So wearing a face mask may give a false sense of security and make people adopt a reduction in compliance with other infection control measures, which would be hand washing as the primary one. Inappropriate use of face masks, so touching their mask, not changing them regularly, not disposing of them appropriately, which is again inside out, you don't touch it, creates a much greater hazard of infection transmission. The effects of wearing a mask over a long-term period of time can cause decreases in oxygen, can prevent development of brain cells. So for the kids, say that's an issue. And so what I'm requesting is that when you take a look at the package that I've given you, it talks about the laws that are being broken by encouraging, by mandating the use of medical devices. And each and every one of you can be at some point responsible. And for fines, just on the marketing alone, for fines of up to $1 million. If children are injured, if in the long term they find that extended mask wearing caused degeneration of their brains or not proper development of their brains, caused learning challenges from a lack of oxygenation, there could be criminal charges associated with this as well. So it's really significant. I'm not saying this to scare you, I'm saying this to protect you and to protect our kids. So the kids are not at risk of, or minuscule risk. They have more risk of dying from the flu or being hit by a car, of catching and transmitting COVID. If you have the opportunity, and many districts are now, of removing that mandate for our kids, they will be much healthier and much happier, and you will be able to help their development in a very significant way, which is what schools are meant to do. So the information is there for you on that. The next thing I want to talk about is the mandates for the staff for vaccination. And when we take a look at the Nuremberg codes, and these are international codes, and these are under Article 32 of the 1949 Geneva Convention, which is mutilation and medical or scientific experiments not necessitated by the medical treatment of a protected person, and these are prohibited. So according to Article 147, conducting biological experiments on protected persons is a grave breach of the convention. And protected persons are anybody who is not actively participating in the experiment, meaning they haven't signed about 1,000 pages saying, I agree that I'm participating with an experiment, which is most of us. Anyway, the penalty for this is actually death, according to the international laws. So bringing forward experimental procedures, propagating experimental procedures, that is very, very, very significant. The first part of the code is that voluntary consent is essential. And with the experimental shots, they are experimental until 2023. It doesn't matter if they've been accepted by any governmental body, they are still experimental because we haven't gone through that time period yet. Every single person who gets one of these needs to be signing a waiver saying that they understand that they're getting a shot in accordance with an experimental procedure. That is not available for anybody when they take these shots. And the fact that it is happening here is no reason to bring it forward as a mandate for everybody. Everybody needs that voluntary consent. If you make a mandate for your staff to take one of these shots, you are contravening Nuremberg Code number 1, which is voluntary consent is essential. I lost my job because I cannot take one of these shots. I have a genetic condition called myocarditis, and if I take one of these shots, the chance of me dying immediately or within the next 3 months is more than 60%. So my choice that was given to me by one of my employers was to take a shot that was likely to kill me or be terminated. Is that voluntary? Is that sensible? I have 3 unsolicited exemptions because of that condition. Were they accepted? No. That's not voluntary. And there are many other people like me who are out there. The shots themselves are not necessary. There are medical treatments which are available, although our governments are trying very, very hard to block those. They are considered effective. They've been studied for many, many years. There have been awards given based on these medications. The countries that are using these medications have brought their curves down to nothing. The countries that are the highest in vaccination now have higher death rates from the shots than from COVID. In Nova Scotia, we kept data, and there in 2018, the numbers of deaths from the flu were 63. In 2019, the numbers of deaths from the flu were 67. In 2020, the numbers of deaths from the flu were 0, but the numbers of deaths from COVID were 62. Just something to think about in terms of actual data that's available for anybody to take a look at. The other part is the vaccinations, the COVID vaccinations being offered to children. Children do not have the capacity to understand any of this. They don't have the capacity to give informed consent, and their risks are negligible. Being a part of that, we don't know the long-term impacts at all. And there in the UK, there is a group called the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. They're a standard government agency that is hired to study new medications coming out. They studied the shots from COVID, and they put out a multi-page report that talks about all of the risks associated that they found. What's that? It's in there, yeah. And then they concluded the MHRA now has more than enough evidence on the yellow card system to declare the COVID-19 vaccines unsafe for use in humans. Dr. Byron Riddle, who is an immunologist and received $250,000 from our Canadian government in 2020 to look at COVID-19 and the vaccines in relation to it, stated, where our children and adolescents are concerned, so this is the conclusion of his report. Where our children and adolescents are concerned, it is crucial that we carefully follow a precautionary principle. Children and adolescents have a minuscule risk of severe illness and death from COVID-19. The risk of vaccination, no matter how theoretical, must be fully investigated and understood. Canadians must question the accelerated and indiscriminate vaccination of all children and adolescents with a vaccine, for which critically important biodistribution, pharmacokinetic, and safety data on the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein are missing. This data is now becoming available and it's not looking positive. The Canadian government should be called upon to immediately halt the mass vaccination program of children and adolescents until such time as these studies are conducted and the uncertainties about the potential pathogenicity of the spike protein can be addressed. This is a gentleman, an immunologist, Guelph University, who was hired by our Canadian government. That's his conclusion. So, school districts, Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Langley, Surrey, Vancouver, New Westminster, Burnaby, Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows, and the Sunshine Coast South are not mandating vaccines for their staff, and they are removing mask mandates for their kids. Powell River can do the same. Powell River has that opportunity to do the right thing. Each and every one of you right now can stand up and protect our kids. That's your job. That's what we're here for. You have a lot of information in the package that I've given you, and that can help you to inform your decision. They're well referenced. They're put together by solid scientists, mostly doctors, who are bringing information forward that the mainstream is not providing. The mainstream is censoring.
Thank you, Ms. Riddle. I appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us today. Okay, Ms. Marshman, back of the room.
I'm gonna change the topic.
Yeah, and for everyone who joined today for presentation, you're free to stay. Of course, it's an open meeting. You're also free to go. It's up to you.
Be committed. Yeah, no, I know. Okay, free to commit. More from you. Yeah, step, sure.
My preamble is this has nothing to do with the discussion that's been happening. This is on literacy rewards that we're doing at Henderson, things that have been working really well, and our school goals. So that's what
It's actually coming up. It was coming up.
Well, in the meantime, Jasmine, you can tell about your EDIS, that's what.
Yes, so we just started kickoff today for Everybody Deserves a Smile. This is our third year for EDIS. It's been going on for about 18 years on the island. If you aren't familiar with it, it is students creating Christmas gift bags for the most at-risk members of our community, obviously targeting homeless, but also kind of goes on to people at risk and in housing, in transition. So what happens is the students, we collect at Henderson hats, socks, scarves, mittens, and then toiletries, toothbrushes, toothpaste, all donated. I think we have enough toothpaste and toothbrushes from Dr. Machen and Dr. Snot for about 3 or 4 years. Which is excellent, and there's soaps that go in there as well. We take anything and then we find use for anything that's left over. So last year, for example, we had a bunch of toiletries designed for women. Somebody donated a whole bunch, crates of bubble baths and stuff. So we also do Valentine's bags for women, and those get dispersed through Poverty Law and other organizations. So the bags are painted by kids. They're gift bags. The items are all laid out in the gym. We're hoping we can host you all to come this year to do, and you can fill your own bags. You go and pick your items, and you can personalize it. You're told if you're doing a bag for a girl for a woman, a man, and our need for children has gone up. Our first year we had 1 child on the list, and last year we had about 18. So that has definitely gone up. All of the items we have, people don't need to buy stuff for it. It's donated, knitters clubs donate all sorts of stuff, so we have all sorts coming in. It's the PowerPoint literacy projects. And then it's all filled. Firefighters are coming and they pick them up and deliver them to the different organizations that hand it out. Included as a bag is also a homemade Christmas card from kids and baked cookies, home baked cookies. And then they get the bags. We also last year took about 15 bags and placed them in areas around town that we knew people were living and they may not access community organizations. So under the bridge at the complex, behind churches, other areas that we had seen evidence that people are living or we've seen people stay there, we put them in plastic bags and they were gone the next day. So that was really great to know that they were picked up right away.
Joyce, how are the students involved?
So the students paint the bags.
Yeah.
This year we're doing 300.
Wow.
Our first year we did 100. And the students make the card. They're allowed to sign their name. There's no other information, but they try to personalize the card as much as they can, just letting the person know I'm thinking of you, all of that. Kind of happy holidays, we hope you're okay. And then the kids fill the bags. So they get a bag and we're told, okay, we want you to do a bag for a man, and they'll take all the stuff. And it's very emotional watching them decide, I want him to have this hat and I want him to have this scarf. So it gets quite emotional and then they're all collected. And this year we've changed it from however EDIS to Coffet because we are including Texada, Lund, Salty Bay. So we're covering the whole area now. It started much, much smaller and has grown exponentially. So we're starting to involve other schools, asking if they'd like to make the cards, paint some bags. Today, right now, we're hosting a bag painting at the gym for school district employees to come and paint some bags. Dale's been a part of that before. So yeah, it's just the kids love it. And there's books that go along, there's lesson plans that go along with it. There's a lot of talk of it. The kids really get into why they're doing it. So I think by the time our littles are older, it'll be just fabric of the school. This is what we do at Christmas. So yeah.
There you go, bonus presentation.
There you go. You get my bill. 2, I was only doing 1. Okay, so last year, COVID school year was pretty quiet, not gonna lie, it wasn't that awful. It was no interruptions, very focused, kids were in class all day, not a lot of interruptions, and teachers were really able to focus and sort of hone in on gaps and lessons and taking it, but we weren't finding that we were having a lot of joy. We weren't having assemblies, which are kind of my thing, so we were just missing that joy piece, that really pumping kids up for their accomplishments, so we started looking at what we could do. So that's where some of this started. Our goals at Henderson are to improve student literacy. That's our first one. We're not so hot right now coming off of with the COVID gap, so we're really pushing that hard. And our other is connectedness, which has been at Henderson for years in Kristen's reign as well. So they do a lot in the community and they like to do things with the community. So EDIS was obviously a natural fit. We do things for Kiwanis and Willington Creek and all sorts of ways that we can pull in things to do. So the first thing I brought in last year was the Reading Rewards book vending machine. And if you really want to disappoint kids, bring in a vending machine and then fill it with books. That's really one way to bum them right out. So it took about 2 months from I saw the idea on a Facebook page that I belong to, and it was a what if we could, what if we did this, and then I just thought, well, why can't we? Why couldn't I? So I started bugging Trevor at Aaron Vending a lot, and he said, I'm sure I can find you something, I'm sure. And I said, I know you can. So then he said he had one and it took a while to arrange delivery, and then I got a cell phone and it came a lot faster. So book donations was easy. The Kiwanis book sale, I went, I had the place to myself and filled 3 bags, and she's found out what it was for and didn't charge me anything. The school did give a donation, but it was very generous of her. families bring in books, once the kids have read it, they know they're not gonna read it again. I find things on Swap and Shop, so books are great. We have Panago pizza gift cards, I plunk those in there every once in a while. We'll do stickers, anything to kind of shake it up a little bit and grab their attention. Because we haven't had Scholastic Book Fair in 2 years, I'll put fancy pencils or pencil cases, and they get excited when they see those in journals. So what happens is in class, and each teacher has their own system of how the kids earn the tickets. So they get a golden I did it ticket from their teacher. It could be sustained reading, home reading, they've leveled up, whatever it is. That's not set by the school, that's set in the classroom by the teacher. They bring it to me, and I don't know why it's not
Next.
there we go. And they trade this for $1.50, because everything in there is set for $1.50. They put their money in and they make their selection. So, once or twice I've been asked, what if I don't find anything, do I keep the $1.50? No, you do not. You can find something. So, and it ranges from pre-K books to, you can see there's lots of novels, there's Archie comics, and then for those kids that aren't really keen on reading, there's always something that they find, usually an Archie comic they'll take. There's also books that don't fit in there, so we have a box on the side that also prize books, like the big ones that don't fit. But it's fantastic. The kids love it. They get excited when they see something they want, and then they're really excited when they say, they're really good at coming to my door and saying, is this a good time? And then telling me how they got it. They love telling how they got it. So, why I brought it in, which I've covered, not having assemblies, we do a big pump up with celebrations, especially handing out the TELUS backpacks. I do a big thing about that. And not having those, I was noticing missing just that joy and celebration and rewarding kids. And this is just, when they see popular books, they are heading back to their class and, okay, I gotta get my reading done because I want that Star Wars book, or I want whichever one is in there. So that's ticked along last year, and then we started talking about, with the connection theme and the literacy theme, we need to pull in some home reading. We're having a really difficult time with that. So I found this organization, which is in the States, Read to Them, and they do one school, one book. It's basically a home reading program, but then you follow it up and celebrate it at school. So we chose Flora and Ulysses, which I hope you've all read and enjoyed, although there's some weird parts in it. That's okay. And the design was that we are going to pull people in. The reason we picked Flora and Ulysses was there's a new Disney movie. So that was going to be our culminating event, which we just had last week. With this program, compared to other programs, they do chapter books. There's other one school, one books, but they do picture books, and then it doesn't engage the older kids. It's really great for the littles, but not so much for the older kids. So it's finding a book that families can read together, and then it's kind of reread in class through the day. The kindergarten grade 1 listened to it on tape while they were eating. That's how they reinforced it. And then every lunch was trivia. So there was a question about it, who lived at this address, what did William Spiver say about this, all the different things from the book. And 5 winners every lunch, and they come barreling down with their answers and get to pick prizes. And then we also had, there were squirrel stuffies, those were hidden around the school, and then each class had their own, sort of as their, I've lost the word, but stuffy person representing the book. Whatever the word is for that, mascot. And every kid got a book. It didn't just go to each family. Every child got a book with their name written in it and a note from me. So they were really excited, and some families took home 3 books, but that's okay. And next one will be better because we'll have assemblies. So these are the things we did. I gave all the teachers packages. Teachers pay teachers. If you're a teacher, you know it's just amazing to get. You can find units on anything. So I gave all the teacher stuff. So part of the plan for me was to not put any work on teachers. I didn't want them to have to, oh, she's making us do this. So I gave them everything. They could pick and choose from a big resource package of what it is they want, how much they wanted to do it or how little, it didn't matter. And then stuff to do, and then I ran things each day. So this class I sent out, there was a sewing pattern for squirrels that the kids were supposed to hand sew, but then the teacher got carried away and she made them all out of old sweaters in her house, and every kid got their own Ulysses, and then they talked about what was their Ulysses superpower, and so they all got a squirrel stuffy from their teacher. So, as I said, in part of the presentation that Kristen asked is sort of the where are we going and what are we doing next. So our literacy scores are quite low school-wide. We're looking at getting them about positive, about being reading, but even if they're not actually reading. So just all that love of books and excited about books. We are doing lots of work right now. We've got our guided reading, intervention, literacy classes are up and running. We just really want kids to be positive about having books in front of them and in their hand. And to do that, we need to build their confidence. We have intermediate students who are below grade level, and as they get older, they know it. And then, so trying to build them and celebrating their gains as they're moving along their journey in literacy. Our first one with Flora and Ulysses was a bit of a soft approach, not having a kickoff assembly or anything like that, so it was a lot of me being weird on announcements. But I'm hopeful with the next one in the spring, we'll be having those assemblies again, and we'll have a big kickoff with it. My plan is to gift wrap each book and hand them out, and maybe have someone dressed as our next book is The Wild Robot. And then, this one doesn't have a movie, but the movie day we had, I went around with concession snacks. Everyone could have popcorn, licorice, or Rice Krispie treats, and they were really excited to put their orders in. So where to next? We're expanding and sort of upping the I Did It tickets. Kids have kind of reached a plateau. We need a bit of a refresher, and getting more book fair pencils, erasers, the Panago pizza coupons, everything rotating through. And looking at other sponsors who might want to put stuff in, so it's that whole drawing in community as well. We're having meetings to talk about what's working, how to adjust, whatever's needed, and then Wild Robot starting to reach out to businesses in the community. Again, this time it was soft. I gave you guys a book. Next, there'll be books at City Hall and everywhere else that we can roll people in. And then, so this is one school, one book. Again, so that's what it cost me, just for information. Because it's an American company, if you do it in the States, they send you this box of all this great stuff, including the books. Because we're in Canada, they don't cross the border with that, so I got everything digital copy and printed off stuff and ordered through Scholastic, which found it's a little weird when you're putting in an order for like 150 copies of the same book. So that took them a little while to gather, but it all got at the school by September. I put on there that, so the cost is about $800. I have a small school, it'd be much more at others. And after I do the Wild Robot, which I've already paid for, and I need to get some more ideas, I'm just gonna do it myself and make my own packages, because I can steal stuff quite easily. So the other piece is, there's many districts in the States that do one district, one book, not just one school. So in doing this presentation for the principals last week, talked about that might be something we look at next year, is doing that and promoting it through town wherever we can, and having kids talking about walking into a store and seeing a picture of something from the book they're reading, or having the teller talk to them, or the hostess, or whatever, somebody mentioning, oh, are you reading that? And then watching them sort of light up that someone else knows what they're doing and acknowledging it. So that's what we're doing.
Pretty good stuff, Jess.
Any questions?
Can you just tell me a little bit more about this one district, one book?
So in one district, one book, every elementary school in that school district reads the same book at the same time. So I don't know if in your packages if I give you a schedule, but there's so what the parents got, which more than what you got. So the parents got the introductory letter, and then they got a schedule of what to read each day, and it's about 15 minutes a day. The other thing I learned is 2 weeks. I would do 4 weeks next time, and I would put the dates next to it because weekends threw people off. We had a long weekend. They were like, do we read on the weekend? Do we not read? I assumed everyone would read, but apparently I got a little head on my trivia questions, and people were saying, we're not on that chapter yet. So I would definitely make this more specific and longer for families that need a bit longer to read. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. There's always so many wonderful creative projects coming out of a little school that could.
Yeah.
With big heart. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
like, has your school or has our district ever, looked at like Dolly Parton's Imagination Library?
I've looked at it.
Yeah.
I don't know if district has.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it around the same price point or?
I actually didn't price it out for the school,
Oh.
but I could look at it to compare,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just again that shipping across the border, it gets, I don't know why there's such a thing about
Well, I
books.
think because now it's in Canada, you might
Oh,
not.
maybe.
But I think I read somewhere Oklahoma does the Dolly Parton Imagination Library
Yeah, I'll have a
school,
look,
so.
for sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Okay, well, that's our wrap for presentations. Do we have any questions? Okay. We're ready to chairperson's remarks then. For some, November is a time when friends, families, and communities come together to celebrate the victory of light over darkness and knowledge over ignorance. For some, it's a time to rest following their hard work of the harvest season, or to begin planning and preparation for upcoming festivities. For all of us, it's a time to remember, to be thoughtful and reflect on how we honor the people who have served and continue to serve Canada during times of war, conflict, and peace. In July of 1921, the Great War Veterans Association adopted the poppy as the official flower of remembrance. The poppy remains a significant symbol of Remembrance Day, recognizing the time that the First World War armistice came into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. This year, we celebrate the 100th year of wearing a poppy as our visual pledge to never forget those who sacrificed and continue to sacrifice for our freedom. There's never a better time than now to acknowledge and draw upon the courage of others while we face the challenges of today and into the future. All of our schools participated in remembrance assemblies. Many students throughout the district came together to showcase their talents, creativity, and musical stylings as part of the 2021 Remembrance Day ceremonies. You can visit our website still at sd47.bc.ca to enjoy those contributions. Our senior staff have been working alongside a policy specialist to provide expertise and guidance in our commitment to overhauling our policies and administrative procedures. As a team, we recently spent a day-long session working together through the many details of the 5th iteration of our policy documents. Although still in progress, the workshop was a productive leap forward in our work. Separate but related to board policy, we met in a closed meeting this month and have directed staff to engage our local health authority to provide the information and expertise we need to effectively contemplate a position on vaccine policy. We are aware that many in our community struggle to meet their before and after school childcare needs, and we're happy to report that we are approaching the home stretch of planning and working through the licensing process to pilot a new option for our students and their families. We're on track to offer this much needed service in neighborhood schools on January 3rd. Principals will be sending out registration information starting December 1st. Earlier this week, we were suddenly reminded how impactful extreme weather can be for our normally temperate and relatively low-risk region. Our thoughts turn now to our family, friends, neighbors, and colleagues who must carry a new, unimaginable layer of burden. We must continue to demonstrate patience and kindness for ourselves and toward others as we navigate the pressures of yet another unprecedented experience. Last month, our school communities were asked to identify ways in which their unique needs could be supported with funding directed to mental health, learning supports, and resources. As you'll notice in our meeting package today, staff have risen to the challenge once again. School District 47 is committed to implementing a variety of strategies to address gaps, challenges, and inequities facing students and their families throughout our district. We will continue to work together and to support each other so that we can positively affect outcomes for our students and our community. And without further ado, we'll move into the adoption of the agenda. Do we have someone to make the motion to accept the regular meeting agenda of November 17th to be adopted as circulated? Jacqueline, second for Brendan. All in favor? Carried. Okay, and the adoption of the minutes on the table of the motion that the regular meeting of October 20th, 2021 be adopted as circulated. Brendan, Rob, all in favor? Carried. You'll notice our reported closed meeting minutes. We don't need a motion for those. And incoming correspondence, we have items 4A through 4J. Any questions, thoughts, or concerns around any of the communication pieces this month? No? Okay, hearing none. Motion that the correspondence listed in items 4A to J be received. Rob? Doug? All in favor? Carried. Okay, we have no outgoing correspondence. this month, so that moves us to the superintendent's report.
Okay, so, first, when you adopt my report, we're gonna talk about, mental health and learning support, resource grants that we put out to schools, and we've had discussion in committee poll, and we, put out to schools to address, COVID, the gaps in learning, and also to address, wellness initiatives and mental health initiatives in schools. We received a grant from the Ministry of Education, but the board also said we would supplement that with some of our own resources to support schools. We've done some district initiatives. We're working with the PRDTA and had some matching funds for a wellness project, as well as a few others. These are specific to schools because we wanted schools to be able to tailor the grants to what they thought were priority needs within their schools, and are reminded that this is a supplement above and beyond what we already provide in terms of intervention supports in schools. So Kristen will just talk about the grants that we're proposing to you for your approval.
So I'll just do a brief run through and then you can ask questions afterwards. Just I'm thinking that you probably read through most of these. Most of them are around the $10,000 mark.
Can you come up a little closer? I'm having trouble hearing.
Most of them are around the $10,000 mark, but some did ask for additional funding. First of all was Henderson, and they're looking for some additional support to provide specific targeted intervention to primary students. And so that would be a partial teacher. Then we have Edgehill is looking to provide some support from an educational assistant to supplement their outdoor learning program, and using that to supplement the mental health piece. They're also looking for a bear wear kit and a walkie-talkie force. They have 3 different outdoor education spaces at Edgehill, so they're really hoping to find a way to utilize them for some of the classes with younger students to have that additional help. Then we have Kelly Creek, who actually, the One School, One Book initiative that Jasmine is doing in Henderson, they're wanting to take that on as well. So to get some funding for that, and to also supplement their library with some reading resources and furniture, again, to promote literacy within their school. Brooks is looking at some funding for their theater and with their new drama program. And then Westview has a couple initiatives. First of all, they're looking for a portion of a teacher to provide social emotional learning within the classroom context and within some small groups. And then they are doing a book club there that combines parents as well as staff. And right now they're reading teachers these days, but she's wanting to continue that with some additional books. And then finally they're looking at a speaker series, and I asked her if she'd be willing to open up that speaker series for parents to provide mental health topics, and she said she would be happy to do that. So she would be willing to organize that. So those are just very brief overviews of each of them, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes?
I think obviously you have to trust in the process and knowing that you're leading the decision, but it seems like it's quite a stretch between Westview wanting a social emotional learning focused teaching versus we want to, and again, I don't know the details, you're not saying this, but we want to improve the theater program. Those, all of that's probably great, but does that actually address the mental health crisis that the kids are in? I'm not sure. So, and again, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it's a bit funny when I hear like to help the outdoor learning program from Edgehill versus where Kelly Creek is doing the One School, One Book, which I think is fantastic, and they don't have the same influence in my opinion. So it's just a question. I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
But to me, I just questioned a little bit.
So when we put the grants out, because the funding's coming from the 2 grants, which area they felt their school needed supports with.
And
So-
sorry, I have a second question for that, is were teachers involved, or was it just on each admin person?
No, admin has had conversations with their staff as well. Yeah.
Jacqueline, do you have a question?
My comment was really the same as Brendan's, that they did seem quite different.
These are the two grants that you presented to us before, right? Like we're familiar with
Yes,
already.
yes.
The two criteria, and I think that it was intentional because we're doing a number of things that are district-wide, with the funds, and then we felt it was really important to go directly to schools and let them have those conversations and set what they believe might be the priorities. And I agree, they're very diverse in terms of what, because it could be from, the learning agenda and the gap to mental health and wellness and bringing things together. And so they are really diverse, and really that's why we've had the process and bringing it here, for that discussion and approval, knowing that it was going to be quite diverse, and it's really about allowing the schools the opportunity to make those decisions based on their own culture.
Can I just jump in? And these are the kind of mini grants that we were looking at. And if you remember from some of the last meetings, some of the bigger items with our installing our schools and the sexual health literacy and the mental health literacy, that's all been added to Brooks. And because we're a one school district, I think sometimes those pieces kind of go to the sidelines when we're thinking about all the different kind of programs that we have. So those were already put in or are currently being put in. So this was kind of one of the mini ones that teachers were kind of looking to add in themselves outside of those bigger picture items that we had already discussed.
Thanks, Allison. Doug, did you have a question?
Well, Kristen, there's a couple of schools that are missing, so I assume they haven't had anything yet?
Oh, yeah, good call. So, James Thompson with the transition of the new principal.
Right, yeah.
I've told her about it, but I thought it would be nice for her to have a little bit of time in there before she identifies what the needs are. So the plan is before Christmas, she would submit something as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And Tech Aid is the same thing.
Yeah.
And the second question I have is, and thanks for tolerating me, is the Henderson, the primary target. So I think, like the primary kids with the target, I think that's fine. The partial teacher, is it again social emotional, or is it just like, hey, we need an extra teacher and this isn't sustainable? So is there a role identified?
I think
Did you look at
what
that?
their focus is specifically on literacy.
Okay, which is
So,
great. This is
yeah.
great. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So there is quite a lot of intervention already there.
Yeah.
But I think they're really hoping, that if they can get in and target specifically, I think they're looking at primary. So the intervention teacher targets everyone, but really putting that extra bit of focus on those primary students, hoping that they can make an impact given the nature of what's happened with, COVID. and
Thanks.
such.
Thanks.
Can you just remind me how much the grant was? Cause if one school's getting, say 30, one's getting 10, like, is that, adding up to the total of the grant, or is there still obviously room, because JT and they haven't said anything, but.
So it was 10,000 per school.
Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, that's part of why we're here is to see, I think, a few schools had some additional requests. So that's.
And I think the issue is we didn't want to, if they had priorities, we said, to put them in there, well, look, we know that we're in a healthy position to provide more resources than the grant, than was available in the grant. So we said to put those in. We've had discussions as a team, and this is what we're bringing forward. So, we know we have the resources and have the support, and so that's.
Are the other schools who only put in for the 10,000 aware that the other schools put in
Yes,
for more?
they're all aware. We just said, we'd like to, this is what the grant gives us, but don't let it hold you back if there's things that you really believe you need. Present them, we'll have the discussion, and if we think, then we went back and asked more questions and things, and then are bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Is there like senior staff that had I don't want to say agree that these are issues, but is the numbers at Henderson, they're quite significant in the report, is that not an issue at other schools?
You know, I think that there's needs at all the schools, but maybe they're, because they're specifically targeting, literacy pieces. Like, all the schools are getting quite a lot of support, so I don't think just because it's targeted for interest, that doesn't mean that.
But are those literacy issues at other schools too, like the same
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
percentage?
And I think that's always the issues why we went back directly to schools. We've done some things as a district, but looking at always knowing that, you know, the resources can be used in all these different ways, and everybody would take, you know, 100,000 if you gave it to them, but they'd have a way of spending it to support the students. So it's really just looking at, you know, what is it that we can do within what we have, and this is just, if you remember, this is one small piece, because we're looking at other uses of our resources in our budget as we move forward too, because we already have a lot of targeted intervention in place and other supports. So this was like, we have our regular programming, then we have intervention that we put on top of that, and this is on top of that. So it's kind of the third layer of support. Okay. Ready to move on?
Thank you.
Okay. So the next, it's related. We had this discussion about the mental health resource hub that I was going to talk about, but it was part of our more of the district planning and saying and having hearing discussions, and we've had also with Izzy and Eileen, and it's really around mental health of not only our staff but students and parents, and how are we supporting it. And a lot of the kind of discussion is always, you know, we're having all of these issues in schools and a lot of anxiety among people, and nobody knows where the resources are, and we're always feeling like there's all kinds of resources. So it was really, how can we help get this information out to all of those groups, so that they're aware of what kinds of resources are there. And so that was what that is what this project's about.
So yeah, we've had lots of discussions with union presidents and the administrators and obviously the senior team, and wanting to really address some of the mental health and wellness pieces that we know are present, you know, not just in Powell River, it's definitely a provincial, national, international thing with COVID especially. Lots of questions around where to find support, what supports are available, and trying to get through the mental health pieces that are available to them in a system. And so I know the conversations that we do have, it's really about 3 conversations, the sort of individual things that we can do for our own self-care and our own wellness, and then making sure that everybody knows some of the group or organizational pieces that are in place, like these mental health grants that are available to schools, or like the availability of sick days, or Starling Minds, or our EFAP. Those are sort of organizational pieces, some of the professional learning stuff that we do. And then of course the system pieces, the systemic pieces that we work on. So our equity committees that look at SOGI, Indigenous education, those sorts of things. So those sort of 3 conversations are happening simultaneously. And I know that we've talked about it with the administrative team especially, because it is important to have those conversations so it doesn't look like we're just doing cutesy wellness with the, you know, offering the hub, so to speak. So I wanted to kind of preface the hub with that comment, because we are doing a lot at the organizational and systemic level. The hub itself, we want to put it onto the website. So this is just the sample here, which is on a PDF document, but will actually just live on a website from our district. And each of them will be just clickable, and it's just a way to kind of curate resources, information, and links to actual programs for people. So we're talking about all stakeholder groups. We want teachers and staff to access it. We want parents and students to access it. And people in the community can even access it. So it's all in one spot. That will go onto the website, and those will be updated with the links. So one column is just about educating yourself about mental health and wellness. The second column is just taking care of your positive mental health, so that's the taking care of ourselves. And then when you need intervention, so maybe it's a mental health challenge or possibly even more mental health disorders, where do you go as staff members, as students? And so that will be listed in that third column. And then just sample wellness activities that teachers can do, students can do on their own, or parents can do at home with their children. That will be in the sample. And again, really trying to identify all three levels at the same time. So what are we doing individually? What are we doing as a class? Because that's considered a group wellness activity. What are we doing as a school, as a district, and then those systemic pieces. We're going to pair it with, we're calling them wellness blasts, and each week we'll kind of highlight one and give some information, and then highlight that to each stakeholder. So staff will get a separate one, parents will get a separate one, and students will be getting them through their teachers.
Did you have a timeline on the launch of what that really looks like in the community?
Sorry?
Like when this goes live, what's the timeline you're looking at for that?
We're hoping to go probably each Monday, so we're almost ready, so it's probably gonna hit this Monday. That'll be the first one, and that will just kind of be coordinated through the senior team and working with HR, and I know Eileen and Izzy have given resources as well. Tony's been giving resources, and just each week we'll just do a quick one. It's not meant to be super intensive. The intensive part was just the setup, which is almost done, and then it's just the email highlighting, and we can also highlight on our social media pieces as well.
Okay, great. That kind of alludes to the next question I was going to ask, because you mentioned, emails to parents, to students, and to staff, but then you also mentioned the broader community use of the product, and I'm wondering, how you plan to kind of permeate that information or the availability of that to the community.
Yeah, and right now we mostly use Facebook and Twitter to do that, but schools themselves also have Instagram pages that they'll be able to kind of use as well, but that's the extent of doing the community piece at this point.
And I think one of the questions really coming back to the board is, if you remember with our communications plan and report, is the conversation about what do you push out. So we have the ability to push out right from the district level to all families in the district and all students, and we've always been reluctant to use that, to be pushing that out all the time, because then people get inundated with things they don't want. And if you remember in the report, it's a conversation of parents prefer to hear most of their information direct from either from the teacher or from the school, and then lastly from us at the district. So I guess the question for a bit of a conversation is, do we take this information and push it out from the district level through MyEd, or do we push it to the schools to push out to their families? And again, I don't really have the answer of what the best method of pushing that out, because that's always the issue. That's really the issue when we started having this conversation of saying there are a lot of resources out there, and the district is doing a lot in terms of being able to address the issue, but people don't seem to know about it. So it's kind of how do you know that you're getting to the right people in the right way?
I think it sounds like a great question for a communications specialist.
Yeah, and none of this is new information. This has gone out in lots of different ways, through different people, through the district, through the union, through the schools themselves, and so this is just one other method of trying to kind of curate and doing a bit of a one-stop shop for people who are feeling possibly overwhelmed with all of the info, and they can just kind of click once and get some lists.
And then from that platform, we'll of course be able to have some sort of analytics or whatever, like to see the usage and measure that down the line.
I don't know if we are able to do that. That's probably a question for, I don't know the answer for the website clicks.
That's actually a pretty important question. Who developed it?
Sorry?
Who developed it?
Develop what?
The actual app web piece.
It's Scholastic.
Yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
Not that we don't want personalized data.
Well, it would be very interesting, and Matt used to be able to know, and I'm sure it's still in the system, who clicks on which page.
Okay.
So it would be really interesting to see how many people are actually
Mhm.
de-identified, obviously.
Yeah.
So is this going on the main school district website then?
It will be, yeah. Yeah, so it's already set up as, it's mental health and wellness. It's hidden right now because I'm still adding the table. And then this table that you see is almost replicated within just the website itself. And then there will be a link on that front page. And then the link obviously can be sent out in lots of other ways.
I like it. I think it's great having it all in one spot. And to me, this seems like something that my end might be an appropriate distribution route for because it's not school specific at all.
Mhm.
I think it's great that you put it together though. It's gonna be very helpful, I think.
Okay, the next issue is mental health check-in. So again, it was part of our conversation, and I can't remember, I think it actually came up here. It's kind of like, how do we know? Because mental health in terms of measurement and how it's going is a difficult measure. And so we thought what we would do is we've asked principals at every staff meeting to have a mental health check-in with all of the staff. So basically, and we're helping them with some scripted language around how they're doing, but also how the culture of the school and the students. And we want it to be helpful for the board because then it'll be reflected in their minutes as to how things are going, what issues are coming up that have to do with mental health, not only with the students, but also with the staff, and what kinds of things can we do to help or support them going forward. And we just thought it would be helpful that then, because you do see those staff meeting minutes, that we'll all be able to see, kind of reflect each month on how things are going around mental health issues.
Great idea.
And the last is the suspension, exclusion and seclusion report, and that's my report.
Jen, question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Brandon?
I was just saying, was it in there? Because I flipped a couple of times, I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's there, it's right at the end of it.
What
Page was here.
94.
Thanks.
Have you ever done a breakdown of the suspensions by elementary and high school?
Do
Done?
A breakdown of suspensions by elementary and high school?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
On here.
Actually, I didn't hear the question.
It's not broken down, suspensions by elementary and high school. I'd just be
Oh,
curious.
so in other words, like Westview
Our
had
susp-
eight,
our
eight,
suspen-
and
no,
Westview
not
had
even-
one? Is that
Not
what you
even, you don't even have to list the elementary schools, I'd just be curious, like our
The
suspensions.
exclusions and seclusions are
No, the
separated.
suspensions are,
Are not.
Yeah, the suspensions are not. Like, do suspensions happen at elementary
Mhm.
level generally?
mhm, yeah, they do, mostly
Not many.
older,
Yeah.
intermediate
Grade
groups.
6, grade 7.
I just saw an uptick in October, and I'm just curious if it was
That was predominantly Brooks.
predominantly
Oh,
Brooks.
definitely, yeah,
Or-
definitely,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, definitely, but I can, anytime if you want more kind of detail on
Yeah.
suspensions, I bring it to a closed meeting, if you're interested.
Okay, so that being the last piece then, we need a motion to accept that the superintendent of schools report be received as presented. Rob, second by Jacqueline, all in favor, carried. Okay, and that moves to the secretary treasurer's report.
I've got a few items. The first two, the traffic concern and the bike storage, I think it is, arose from conversation in the September board meeting. So with the traffic piece at Westview, concerns were brought forward around the pedestrian safety and the traffic flow at Westview, and then staff were asked to gather some additional information. So what you have here from the school is an outline from the principal of kind of parent and community concerns, the strategies that they regularly put in place with the crossing guard program. And then there's a sample of, I asked her if she could give me a sample of the kind of communications that they put on throughout the year around as reminders on traffic flow and how it's intended to work. What I didn't include in the agenda, but I did review as I was putting some of this together, was during the construction of Westview, there was 2 different traffic studies done. So the first was done prior to the construction, and it looked at traffic numbers and flow around Joyce and Quinnell. It projected what that traffic would look like at Westview and whether or not that would be an improvement. Because if you had kids at the Old Brief Point, you would always see the similar congestion, and you're coming right off a main road of Joyce, as opposed to where Westview's bumped up a block onto Selkirk. So it projected that traffic and deemed it to be an improvement. That was part of the process as we were still contemplating moving the school. And then the second study was done pre-construction, but it was looking at existing infrastructure and what improvements would be needed to house the students and have everything work safely. And the main piece out of that was the push-button pedestrian traffic light on Joyce that was installed as part of the Westview construction project. So
Joyce and Nootka.
Joyce and Nootka. Yeah, so that was part of the school district's bill. The school district paid for the installation of that, and it's intended that if you do it all right, both as a pedestrian and as a driver, you're coming north and south to the lit crosswalk, and then you go to the crossing guard crosswalk that crosses Selkirk, and you've got two directional traffic on Selkirk, where kids can get dropped off and then onto a sidewalk and back to the school. Do recognize, as it is with other schools, that it's still in the peak periods, first thing in the morning, and late in the afternoon, there's way more traffic than what any site would normally accommodate. It would never, because it's not normally that busy. But every school is really busy at those times of days. But it's not intended that the infrastructure would support as though that was all day, every day. And I think coming out of those reports, that was the conclusion, that for those short periods of time that could handle that kind of capacity. The other big improvement at Westview over Grief Point was all the on-site staff parking is around the back, whereas Grief Point, like Edgeship, was all the available parking is taken up by staff when parents are trying to pick up. So it's, I think without question, the new school is an improvement on the old, but it's like all schools, it's not without its challenges. Right.
So Steve, we had this conversation 2 months ago?
September meeting.
Yeah,
is when it
so,
first came up.
what I brought forward was from the group of parents was the concern about the intersection of Masset and Selkirk as being a high-risk area, which still is true, and that not being school district property. Now, I was hoping that we would, and maybe hopefully we decide that today, that we ask the city to do, so not to say, hey, we want a crosswalk, but to say, hey, can you look at this and do something? That is still a high-risk area.
And sorry, you're saying Masset and?
Masset and Selkirk.
Right.
So there is a stop sign on Selkirk, not on Masset. Yeah, there's a stop sign on each side of Selkirk. When Masset goes through, cars come around the corner at higher speed, and kids run across that corner every day. And the kid is gonna get hurt, and it needs to be dealt with. And so it's not our property, but we need to at least, I think, ask the city. I think this is higher volume than was expected. And in fact, so much so that I've told my own children not to pull in the corner and pick up around the back when I do pick up.
Yeah, but the volumes wouldn't be higher than expected, because it was projected out to be the school at capacity, and it's close to capacity.
Right.
There used to be a crosswalk at that end on Joyce that the city eliminated when we installed the push button traffic, because it was intended to direct people to the better push button crosswalk.
Right.
There used to be one.
But is there,
But
even
no.
just one across on Masset, I think would reduce risk of children. There's no crosswalk, but kids go to that corner, it's a stop sign, and walk across. So again, there was just a visual cue, so we're not asking for lights or push button. So, and again, I know it's not school district property, but I really believe that we need to ask the city to do something about it.
Yeah, and all I can say is the circumstance at the time, and it was, the reason there's no crosswalk at that end, is that there was one on Masset, then in order to get to that crosswalk, there should be one on Joyce. And if you've only got one push button light, it was to direct people to the right crosswalk, that was the rationale why they
Yeah,
eliminated the one.
that's fine, but I just think it's time to address this issue.
Is there a possibility then if we do ask the city to have a look at it, that maybe we look at what's happened at Egmont and Michigan, which is where the French school is, and that's a four-way stop. So if they created a four-way stop at Selkirk and Massett,
Right.
would that solve the problem that you're thinking about?
That's what he just said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, he just said to me, but that's what you're, yeah.
Great minds.
Great one.
Great minds.
Say again?
I was saying great minds.
So,
Just happened.
but I would like us to ask the city to, like Steve said, have a look at that corner.
That would be,
So if board.
that would be rocket science.
What's that?
That wouldn't be rocket science to do a four-way stop.
So Brendan, you would like to move that?
I would like to move that, school district staff, C or J, engage with the city of Palmer and ask them to review and, I don't know how you wanna say it, I don't know what's the best wording for you, Steve, but to review it and just, or potentially either propose a four-way stop sign or crosswalk at the intersection of Selkirk and Massett for child safety. Leave it there.
I'll second that.
Yeah, and so we'll draft a letter on behalf of the board.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor, seconded by Rob. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Actually, I guess I can just look at the recording later.
Yeah, that's right.
The second one, there's says oral report, and it's around a letter was added to the agenda at the same meeting in September as a letter that went to Mr. Runas and to the school pack, looking for consideration of a covered bike storage at the high school. So following that meeting, I connected with Mr. Runas. I got the minutes from that PAC meeting, met with him and kind of got the context of some of his conversations with staff and students, and asked him to connect with some of the cyclists to get a bit of feedback, and then kind of taken out of the school's purview. It's more of a facility consideration, and even though it's a bit out of our planning cycle, exploring what we can do, and we'll bring some kind of draft solutions forward. And we've also connected with maintenance staff. They're proposing kind of the pros and cons in various areas around the school, and then I'm working with the consultant we use for our elementary playgrounds, and because they have a number of suppliers that have packaged products. We don't really want to build anything. We want to buy something off the market that is covered bike storage. And then if we look at a few different solutions, and then some of the different areas around the school that would work, then we've got to find something, a footprint around the school that fits the package that we select. So it's, and one of the ideas around that is that we can just pull it off a lot quicker if we don't build a covered space ourselves. If we can just get a packaged arrangement, and I've only had preliminary looks at some of the stuff online, but there's a whole plethora of covered bike areas, from just covered regular storage to full gated commercial apartment type thing. So I'm confident we'll be able to find something that makes sense.
Videos and rooms, I think, is one of the, you said that last time.
I think one of the criteria in the letter was just asking that it was located somewhere where you could pick it up on exterior security cameras. Yeah, so there's different places around the school that probably are more conducive than others, but I think as the year progresses, sometime between now and summer, hopefully we'll have something that we can buy that would work and kind of satisfy that.
Hey Steve, do we have any stats in terms of how much bike traffic we actually have coming into Brooks Secondary?
I don't have those numbers yet, but that was one thing, was just wanted an idea of how many staff and how many students regularly ride, and then also recognizing that if we had better accommodations, that number would probably go up.
Yeah, and if we could find out that, in other words, if we had better accommodation for bikes and we had coverage, would it increase the number of people who would actually use the bikes and come to school that way? But
Right.
both teachers and students, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be the idea, and then because they come in, call them kits, but say a covered area had room for 10 bikes or 20 bikes, whatever one would pick, it would be kind of thinking ahead to buying one, but does this space naturally accommodate maybe 3 so that you could add rather than moving them all over the building. Yeah, so I think there's lots of viable solutions, just take a bit more planning.
But I do think, as Tom said, like with lack of infrastructure, it's hard to predict. So if you ask Dick and Harry, are you gonna ride? And maybe Tom will say yes, and then he sees the other 2 friends ride, okay, I'm gonna start riding. And the other 2 are waiting to ride. Like my own child won't ride because his bike is open and can't lock in summer safety zone, right?
Right. Yeah, no, I think.
So there's gonna be teachers that are riding right now, I know of one that rides all the time, is that particular person probably bring it into the building, right?
Yeah, which is not an option for kids, yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely one regular rider who uses the classroom. There's a few other staff. We've got a shed around the back of the building that we've provided for those staff, for the youth staff. It's a pretty funky solution. It wasn't being used for storage anymore. It was there originally from when they had the business partnership where they were selling canned goods and jams, and I used to warehouse all that inventory. So with that program not being active anymore, there's room for 3 or 4 bikes in there, but that wouldn't satisfy what we're talking about.
Right.
There might be more development too, with the development of the city's infrastructure and cycling and so on, that we might see an increased uptake for people at Brooks.
And then before I actually move on to the next couple items, just around Brooks and going back to my report last meeting where I did the operational report and I had the list of facility projects, and I provided some commentary that supply chain issues, and COVID is the first year we've had the number of projects that weren't completed by school startup. Just bringing that up because as of this week, a lot of those bigger projects are all coming together at the same time. So if you're up around Brooks, Henderson area, the work we've been doing the last month and a bit on replacing the artificial turf field is at the latter stages. So barring any big weather changes, hoping it would be complete by the end of the weekend, and the school might be using it next week. All the concrete site furnishings we ordered finally arrived, and that was predominantly Brooks, but pieces for elementary schools to expand kind of outdoor seating areas. If you remember, there's some concrete seating areas with embedded game boards, chess tables, and then there's some picnic tables that double as ping pong tables. So they all arrived. The crane arrived to load all the solar panels onto the roof of the gym. So that project will start to, or not the gym, sorry, the theater. So that solar project will start to really move ahead. They got about a third of the panels up already, and keep in mind this all happened starting Tuesday. And then also Tuesday, the trucks arrived with the playground equipment for Henderson and Texada. So just bring it up. So those are the projects that had been kind of stalled, and supply chain stuff and everything came together and everything started arriving this week. So those things are going to start nearing completion in the next couple of weeks. The next 2 items. One, the Banff Film Festival, and then there was a late edition that I emailed each of you and then included in the agenda, and it was a request from youth soccer, and so I'm kind of speaking them together because they both are tied into the board's existing health and safety guidelines and our local approach to limiting to a certain degree traditional community use of our spaces. So specific to the strategy we used this year was, for now, has continued to limit community use of gyms, regular school gyms, but we opened up Ocean View to the community. So this letter from youth soccer is asking if you reconsider that, and kind of outlined why they're, at least with youth soccer, is all the adults involved need to be vaccinated in order to be involved, and all the students involved are already our kids, so they're asking that you reconsider the availability of the gyms now that winter sports are back on, and some of that will be alleviated when the turf field is finished, but I don't think the demand will be eliminated, because traditionally they still use gyms for practice space, and the turf is predominantly been for games. And then that kind of marries in with the film festival request, is the film festival, which has been a big community event for a number of years and didn't happen the last few years. They're requesting that the board consider having it this year. It wouldn't really be a K-12 event. It would be under the community guidelines, so it would be at capacity. You'd need to then follow the guidelines tied to that, so it'd be vaccinated people. They would come through the gym. They would use the gym as the screening area and use the gym as the reception area, because the capacity of the gym is so large, and then people would funnel from that kind of holding area and then into the theater. So bringing both of those, because they both kind of tie into the same thing. The board's kind of what was the language we used? With the opening of schools, the measured approach. So I think where we've come from September, we've started opening things up. We've got more volunteers. We've got parent volunteers for field trips outside of the school. What we're looking at is maybe the time is now where students just follow the guidelines as they are. Schools can make their own choices. There's lots of teachers wanting volunteer, parent volunteers in their classroom. And then, yes, kind of for your consideration if you want to.
I'd like to move in that direction.
Move further along.
And I think that the reason they do go hand in hand is that we know by opening up for other events that we're going to get a lot of conversation, because a lot of teachers and schools want to be able to really just follow the guidelines as they read, and be able to open it up to parents and volunteers being in school, as long as they're following the protocol. Because as Steve said, we took that measured approach, which was really over and above what is required, and it is feeling like there is a lot of feeling that it is time to just follow the guidelines and allow people in the schools while following what's required. And some teachers will, and it's as always that some teachers will have volunteers in their classrooms, and others will choose not to, and that's their choice. And right now they haven't had that choice. So we think the timing is there to have that moving
I agree.
forward. But
I think it's time.
it's up to you.
Is there any particular group that does not want this open to the Band Films Festival, or to youth groups, or community band that was asking you, or?
No, it's really it's individual choice, and that's
No,
what.
sorry, what I meant is like,
Not
is the,
a
I don't
group.
see that, but like, that is that, but like, are the teachers union saying, please don't let anybody in the schools?
No, the real thing with Izzy, I mean, Irene's here, who could speak to it, but it's really, she knows that there's a lot of, there's just a lot of opinions out there, in terms of some people want it open up and others don't, but really it's about, for us, is the guidelines are the guidelines, they're required, it's the order, and it's really around having people have those. Really, for us, these ones are easier than allowing, saying, all teachers in schools will make their own decisions about. So individual teachers will be, and if you remember, when we started, it's because of the anxiety and the concern of, this person's doing it, and this person is not. And it seems that in a lot of ways, because we've opened it up a bit, there are places where, right now, where some schools are doing quite a bit more than others, because we'll have some things to happen, and it hasn't caused any real anxiety. And so we're feeling that this won't create that anxiety either, because they have choices. And certainly coming up, it's the Christmas season, and Christmas concerts and those kinds of things. And some schools may decide to do it virtually, and other schools may decide that they want to hold something and follow the guidelines. And So really that's the debate, and that really is a board
Yeah.
decision, because there isn't 100% on either side of this.
You're recognizing that we're going to have a range of reaction and a range of uptake, just like we have with every other element as we move through this, then the senior staff recommendation would be that we go with the regulation instead of the increased measure.
Yes, because as we said, taking a measured approach, we always assume that we would slowly move into this direction, and it seems that when we opened it up a bit, it seemed to have gone well. There isn't any major concerns, and so we think we can move that further. We could, depending on what you want to do, we could also talk to our schools, but we have talked to principals, and they're comfortable with that it would be them talking with their staff and dealing with those issues, and we would just be saying, here's the guidelines, and if you have any interpretation of the guidelines, they would call Steve and move forward.
So assuming if we open up the gyms in the district, right now we have OV, my assumption is that we would do it the same as we did in the past, that each of these groups would have access to be able to apply, and each of the schools would be able to say, our school is open at this particular time. It'd be done the same as before, is that correct?
Yeah, we're pretty close. We determine, call it the capacity, so, and we're probably only looking at the elementary, like typically with Brooks, it wasn't as available as long as some others, because Brooks houses all the high school sports and needs the gyms after school. Elementary, for the most part, if they didn't have their own needs, it was usually say 4 to 9 or 4 to 10, but if the school said, no, we have an after-school club or something, it might only be available 6 to 10. So we would first determine.
Brooks was open, say, they used to open up at 8 o'clock at night or something like that. They had a couple of activities that would go in at that particular time.
Once the school was
Yeah.
done.
Is there any increased cleaning that will have to be implemented with them?
Or maybe I can't hear you.
I was asked if there was any increased cleaning that would.
I can't hear you, sorry.
Increase, would there result in
Cleaning,
increased
more
cleaning?
cleaning. Would there be more cleaning?
Usually not, no.
And again, what we would do is be following the guidelines. So that is the piece of, we're kind of moving to the board, that we're not setting, we're saying, here are the guidelines that are required. And
But
so
do the
if
guidelines
cleaning is
include
required-
increase?
Yeah, exactly.
Steve would have, I don't know exactly.
Contemplates that everything
what it says.
everything's cleaned as it always was, and high touch areas need to be
Right.
cleaned minimally the once a day. So the one thing with the gym is there's not a lot of furniture, it's just the open space. You'd probably still look at a bit of a not modified strategy, but a communication around which doors they come in, limit their access to other parts of the building, and it might even be that we conclude that some schools are better than others and maybe not open them up always, just that if you guys are supportive, then we can look at trying to meet the community demand by having more than just Ocean View open. But I think if you're gonna go that far, you probably wanna go beyond youth soccer, because as soon as youth soccer has it, then some other youth-related club or something might come forward.
So this is my concern, so, youth soccer is like, she wrote a letter, you have to be vaccinated to be a coach, these are kids, the majority of them are in schools already, which is different than the BAP, which is community people, but it said that they have to have a vaccine passport, they
Yeah.
have to wear masks. And then, I think like Brooks is used in the wintertime by adults for badminton club, and there's other clubs, so what's the regulation for them, so it is a bit tricky.
For the community use piece, so use the example of Brooks, that you determined that it was available for community use outside of school between 8 and 10, 5 days a week or something. Any of the community users, because they're not part of the K-12 system, they're subject to the other guidelines, and they would be the ones responsible. So if there's requirements around taking names and contact tracing, they would be doing that. I would think
Who are
that
they accountable to, though?
To the public health.
yeah, that's where
So
they're not
it's the same.
responsible.
They
I would wanna
they
know
take
that,
the
like,
place
that's
of-
actually.
Yeah, and it's already in the existing provincial guidelines that if you're looking at community use, then those users are just like they always were, are like a renter.
Right.
And those renters aren't part of the school system, and they've got to follow those guidelines, and it's, I can't say with this, I'm not as familiar with them, but the difference between that and something like the Film Fest, where it's clearly a community event, then it's like the recent event that the concert at the complex, where whatever the criteria to hold such an event, then that's the criteria.
This speaks to mental health, and for me, the kids anyways, like going to play sports this winter, they're not doing as much, and it's part of the reason that we're having the issues that we're having in school, so I'm in favor of this.
And when I mentioned about probably want to be beyond youth soccer, we would still take the same approach that we always have, which is we've got a filter on, because there's always more demand than space, so the filter is always around student organizations first, and then getting the earlier time slots, and if there is adult organizations, we fill all the youth-oriented needs first, and push adult use to a later time. We wouldn't just open it up and then fill with all the demand, just like with the youth soccer first or Girl Guides or those kinds of things. And we could limit it mostly like we have traditionally, mostly to the gyms, and then there's some ad hoc use by ratepayers associations and stuff, let's say multi-purpose space or something. But we'd already started the year considering those one-off things. If you recall, we had the city use Westview for a community information gathering event, and I didn't hear any pushback from that.
Would it be reasonable to do the cleaning, like to be responsible for the cleaning protocols after community use and push that cost back to the user group? So that we can ensure that the appropriate cleaning protocols are being followed by having our own staff do that?
I think that would be prohibitive. Like I'm just making this up, so I'm using a student sample, I don't really know who's there, but let's say there's a badminton group at Brooks, and there's 10 adults, do they have even any funding whatsoever they go to the gym? So they probably wouldn't be.
Well, that's a good question, but when you rent space anywhere, generally it comes with whatever the cleanup fee is.
But I think we also want to, the cleaning part, we do have that responsibility. So as long as we're following, it's the same thing, as long as we're following the protocol and they're following the protocol, that's what we're saying. Like we may, as we said, we may determine, and we do sometimes as a big group or whatever's going on, that we have to do a little more cleaning, and we continue to do that. But it's just not it's not a board mandate. The mandate from the board is to follow the order, and all the user groups must follow the order. But it doesn't stop us, like we do many times, there's an event, and the principal or whatever say, we're gonna put in a couple more hours because we believe we need to, or there's a big event at Brooks and they put more time into the gym because there's an event. So we continue to do as we've always done now.
And I think if we go down the path with more routine gym use, maybe we would, instead of making it 4 to 10, you're gonna say, it's open till 8:30 or something, and then there's still time for the custodian to clean the gym at the end of the shift or something. Traditionally, that's what
Traditionally, they did it at the end
was
of
done
the
because of user groups. So.
I mean, when we opened everything up, the custodians, that was their last duty of the day, was to go and do the gym after the end of the use. So,
I think as we're in the midst of a phase of switching from pandemic to endemic, I think it's the right choice.
So if you're supportive, we'll take all those things and come up with a plan, which spaces make sense and what times of day, and anything we add to the community inventory of space will be a big uptick on what's available right now, because there was nothing last year, and this year there's only Ocean View, and then again when the field is finished in the coming weeks, that'll alleviate some of the pressure as well.
So are we supportive?
I am.
Okay. You're supportive. Do you need a
Yeah.
motion?
No, I think we've got clear direction. The guidelines are already in place. It was a local provision to modify them down and not take it as far as we could. So we'll look at strategies that continue to open it up a little bit more. One more item. This is an informational item. This is the monthly operating budget actual compared to budget. 77% of the budget is still available, and that's consistent with what you get to expect over prior years. There will be amendments coming, probably by January, once the amended grant comes out in December, and we typically will look to amend to reflect the newer information. You'll adopt an amended budget in January, February. And that's the balance of my report.
Okay, so with that, the motion that the Secretary Treasurer's report be received as presented. Brendan? Doug? All in favor? Carried. Okay, so typically we would have the committee report here, and you'll notice that the committee of the whole was scheduled Wednesday, November 10th, and it was canceled to replace with the trustee working session to review the prospective changes to the board's policy and procedure manual that I mentioned in my remarks. There being no other business, we'll move right to question period. Should there be any? No questions from public today? Okay. Media, Paul, do you have a question?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I appreciate that. First and foremost, I'm hoping you'll send me a copy of your remarks, as you usually do. That's very helpful. I'm hoping you can indulge me for a moment as well, and I need the names and positions of the two presenters. I don't have that information. So if you could provide me your name and your position, please.
Yeah, I'm Kristen Burrell.
Yes?
And Director of Instruction.
And I'm sorry?
Director of Instruction.
Yes? Okay, thank you. And?
Allison Burt
Okay,
and Director of Instruction.
perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. With regard to pedestrian safety, I didn't catch Trustee Behan's motion. Could the Secretary Treasurer advise me what that was?
I have a note to myself to flesh it out a bit further, but informally, that the school district staff engage with city staff to review pedestrian and traffic concerns around Westview Elementary and consider additional mitigation strategies such as crosswalk, four-way stop.
So, and maybe, Paul, we could just
Yeah.
we'll
I can
get
send
the
it.
wording concise and send it to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. That would be very helpful.
Sorry, you have to, sorry, just
Yeah,
clarify,
four-way stop.
Massett and Selkirk specifically.
Massive and Selkirk. Yes, I think I did write that down.
No, yeah, I'll just email you
The motion.
before Friday, the actual motion.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Also, with regard to the Secretary Treasurer's report, what was the youth soccer request?
Open the gyms.
The board consider opening up gyms to community use.
Okay,
Right now, we've just been limited to Ocean View, and in her email letter to me, it was basically with soccer back in full swing, and the weather being what it is this time of year, and the short-term unavailability of the artificial turf. They've had nowhere to practice.
right.
And then lots of game cancellations because so many of the fields are in poor condition. And again, some of that will be alleviated when the field opens up, but it won't change the demand for lots of those teams that want to practice and traditionally have used the gyms for that use.
And with regard to Van Mountain Film Festival's request, will they be able to operate at full capacity or restricted capacity? I didn't quite catch that in the conversation.
It would be full capacity of the theater.
Yes.
Subject to vaccinated,
Right.
proof of vaccination on entry, so that's about 400.
Okay, thank you very much. And my last question is whether there has been any conversation at the board level with regard to mandatory vaccines.
Yeah, I mentioned that in my opening remarks to Paul, that the board met in a closed meeting to request that staff bring forward the medical opinion and expertise for us to effectively contemplate that. So we do expect to be entering into debate about that shortly.
Okay, and those are my questions. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Rob, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.